Okay, I think we're close enough. I will call to order the 49th meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, Thursday, January 24th, 2013. We are going to skip the approval of minutes till we get the draft next week and go straight to item 3. And we usually spend a little time talking about the master schedule, but I'm going to postpone that until we talk with the ombudsman about schedule and also the investigations. The big issue now for the commission is getting everybody's information in for all the background checks. That's the primary gating item right now, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We can only go as quickly as people can get all their information into us. So let's go to 3B, finance update. Commissioner Zuniga.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have included in the packets for your consideration a recommendation to ratify the extension of the current space, the current lease that we have in our headquarters, and make a commitment for additional space. As you might remember, a year ago we signed a one-year lease because the nature of our space needs was evolving. It continues to do that. And we have now identified the need to extend the lease for another year and add additional space of 5,561 rentable square feet. I believe that this option...
Is that the total of the 2 floors?
No, we currently have 7,564 square feet between the 2 spaces that we have in the 7th floor. We would add 5,561 in the 10th floor. This is space that's very much ready for occupancy. It requires very minimum in terms of, there's no tenant improvements or build out. And it was actually the result of good work of our chief of staff in essentially making happen that the tenant is vacating early. So
thanks to our chief of staff.
This is a great opportunity. It's very timely as our staff continues to grow, especially in the investigations bureau, but also in some of the other key staff positions. So we would be renewing and committing to another year of the lease. Both leases, if you will, are an amendment to our current lease. So all of the current rights are preserved, both by the landlord and the tenant. And I believe that this is a great option that maintains our ability to continue to study our space needs as we continue to grow.
And this motion does not, or this recommendation does not include the new space we've heard about that's also available on that floor.
That's right.
Okay, so
there is additional. I don't know the figure, but it's maybe 1,000 square feet or less that could be contiguous to the 10th floor, but that's not included here.
Okay.
So again, I think it gives us the ability to maintain flexibility, and then we will. In the course of this year, we will likely have a much better assessment of the overall needs, and we'll have a good number of months to figure out the long-term, a longer than 1 year term lease after this extension.
Right. Okay. Any
Is there any
discussion?
questions?
Thoughts, questions?
Since we clearly need the space, it's there, it's been well planned, and we ought to do it.
I did mention to Janice that I thought it was worth having somebody with a professional eye look at this. We've sort of been doing it on our own, and even if we had to hire an architect, some people can see, people whose eyes are trained can see stuff that we don't see, and I think maybe we got that from DCAM, but it's worth getting, even though it's still pretty temporary. It's worth getting somebody who sees things, sees space allocations well, to take a look at it.
Yeah, I've got a request in at DCAM and down to a walk for this.
Okay.
Well, if there's
All
no
right.
further,
Do you need a motion on that, probably?
yeah, I
So,
would like so. It's a large
Right.
commitment, so. If there's no further questions, I would move that the commission ratify a commitment with the landlord at 84 State Street to amend the current lease and extend the term of the current space for 1 year, as well as add additional space, which term would be for 14 months, so that both spaces would expire contemporaneously.
Second?
Yeah, second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Background check finances, Commissioner Zuniga.
Thank you. I've also included in the packet a memo for a discussion about 3 key considerations relative to the finances of investigations. As Commissioner McHugh reminded us last week, and in accordance with our regulations, we should post or publish in our website and elsewhere the fees, the hourly fees for investigations. The fees that I've included here as part of number 1, subsection 1, are the loaded fees that we will be paying our investigator staff. These fees have been aggregated by discipline. They are here for your consideration. So one thing that we've also discussed is that we will obtain very shortly, once our consultants make an assessment of the natural persons and number of entities that will be investigated, we will be having, or we will obtain from them what we're calling a forecast in terms of a breakdown of the number of hours that would be multiplied by each of these fees where they apply, and would be a total for the investigations will be calculated at that time. I have included an example of what that summary information would look like.
Through these section by section?
We can. This wouldn't require a vote, in my opinion, unless somebody else
Okay.
thought otherwise. But I'm presenting as what we know to this point as to the level of information that will be available to us and for your consideration.
I was curious as to where the numbers came from. I recognize that they're combined numbers for different disciplines, so they're a blended number, but do they come from our costs, the costs, the charges that the investigators are making, or is there a markup, or how were those determined?
Well, each one of these fees include what we're going to be charged for on an hourly basis.
Okay.
There is a component there for local travel, so
Right.
there is
Right. But it's basically a charge to us.
it's a charge to us that we pass through
we
to
pass
the
through, yeah,
applicant.
okay.
The only cost that's in addition to that, which will be forecasted and then made aware, or, communicated to the applicant, would be international travel whenever that applies. It will not apply, as we understand, to all applicants. So this item number 1 are all costs that are outside of the commission,
Right.
which is why I separated them.
Right.
But they're all inclusive. There's no additional
Okay.
costs.
The only thing I thought might be worth a look, these numbers were bid in their proposal and were substantially lower than
Yes.
the other bidder. And just eyeballing these rates, they seem reasonable to me, but the item G, the research analyst, document administrator, project administrator, report editor, at $170 an hour, I just thought that was worth a little bit of thinking about. Does that number really hold water? And then the paralegals and the administrative assistants, that'd be easy to see what law firms try. I'm sure they're probably right, because I think we've been
Those are in the ballpark.
Are they? Okay, so that answers those. So, and I think, I feel pretty clearly we've been really getting our money's worth out of the consultant, so I don't want to nickel dime them on this, but that 170 an hour looked like the only one that struck me that might be a little bit funny.
Right, right.
So you might probe on that slightly.
We can look at that.
Okay. Okay.
As I mentioned, a forecast like what's in here on page 2 would be made available to this commission and, of course, the applicant in the eventuality that there is a difference from the available monies from the initial application fee. A discussion at that point would ensue.
Right.
For your consideration and discussion, I've included item number 2 here relative to the commission costs for investigations. As per our regulations, we can and will assess a portion of costs that are incurred by the commission and directly attributable to the effort of investigations. And what I've outlined here and I'm recommending and proposing is that we make that on the basis of the salaries, the direct salaries of people directly assigned to that effort that are as part of the commission staff right now for the time and duration of those investigations. In addition to that, there would be an indirect cost assessed also on the basis of those salaries, and I've submitted here for your consideration what I proposed as the calculation of that indirect amount. I've based it on the salaries that we projected for fiscal year 13, as well as the indirect costs for the same fiscal year, calculated the percentage, and suggest that this could be a way to reflect what would be attributable to the, as part of indirect costs, to the efforts of investigations in terms of commission costs.
So the salaries, the direct salaries, for example, when Commissioner Cameron is acting as the director of the IEB, her salary would be a direct salary cost, right?
Correct. Only the proportion.
Whatever
of her,
proportion of her
effort.
time, right. What about the other commissioners? Are you allocating, for example, are you allocating a share of my?
I have not done that. We can have a discussion about that. What I was projecting, and I can come back to you with a detailed number, would be the salaries of the state police, the IB director, and only a proportion of salaries of some central administrative personnel, not the commissioners, and not everybody, of course.
Well, I was thinking about the overhead. So Commissioner Cameron would be a salary expense if she's acting as IEB director.
Correct.
Once we have our IEB director,
Right.
if we're going to be spending some of our time, like right now, talking about this issue, were you counting the commissioner's salary as part of the overhead?
No.
I was.
I
Okay.
was not. I can.
Is it just, it's just, what is it, like just rent and light and?
Yeah, the overhead
The
and-
37%, what's in the 37%?
Everything having to do with rent, supplies.
How about reception?
No salaries other than those directly attributable to effort.
So it would seem to me that there's an overhead salary component, that some of Heather's time would be appropriately allocated, some of my time would be appropriately allocated, some of everybody's, all of our times, sort of central staff time, some is Janice's time.
Right.
Which wouldn't be a direct, percent allocation, but might get factored into the overhead number.
I can look into that. I mean.
Does that not make sense to you?
Well, the methodology is, we may be talking about slightly the same thing. The methodology was based on salaries that could be directly attributable. Because there's a quantifiable,
background
because there's a direct, I could go down to the 20%, let's say, or 10% because somebody spends only, chief of staff 10%, for example, because her time is not always attributable. But once we're done with that allocation, we're done as it relates to salaries. Then we leave salaries alone. We also exclude all of the costs that we pay our consultants, which is part of our budget. And pretty much everything else, rent, supplies, et cetera, is the indirect cost
Right.
that gets apportioned, again, based on the salaries.
I'm just thinking that it seems to me that there is a bunch of central salaries. Reception is an obvious one.
Right.
Chair is an obvious one.
Right.
Which is reasonably allocated as part of that overhead. So
Right.
maybe the 37% is too low. Anyway, I don't know, does anybody else have an opinion on that?
It seems to me that if we're gonna take that route, then it would be worthwhile to classify on a broad scale, something like the receptionist's salary as part of overhead, rather than try to figure out how much time each of the rest of us is likely to devote to.
Oh, I agree with that, yeah.
We can't do that.
I mean, I would count
So-
receptionist salary as part of overhead.
Right,
So the percent would be a higher percent.
right.
And the same, I would have said with the commissioner's staff, too, but.
Well, the good news is that we have somebody who's very, very good in this, coming to work for us very shortly, and who will be in an accounting staff position, who could spend, good time figuring out what proration makes sense. But I can do that as well. It's just a matter of coming back with another
I guess
calculation.
that's the only thing I would add is, are there other things that ought to be included in the overhead rate that aren't?
Worthy of noting, since we're at it, is that I'm using the ratio that comes from the approved budget. It will not necessarily be the actual cost, but it's as good as a ratio as any, in my opinion, to make a calculation, a proration calculation. One key point that I wanted the commission to weigh in was that perhaps unlike the direct costs that we talked about in line item number 1, these costs may not change depending on the level of effort of the investigation. Or in other words, while it may take one applicant with many entities, let's say, and many qualifiers, a lot more investigative time, because there has to be a lot more travel and a lot more documentation to look at. This may not necessarily be the case, and I stress the word necessarily here, for those indirect costs or costs that are incurred by the commission. So I'm proposing that we discuss and decide on whether those commission costs should be divided equally among our 11 applicants at this point, or whether there should be some kind of proration based perhaps on the forecast that I was just talking about in line item number 1, and assign those costs proportionately.
And that raises, that question raises for me the question of what the 37% is a percent of.
The 37% is a percent of overhead, as I have
But
initially.
of what number? You multiply, to get a number, you multiply 0.37 by what?
Well, the tallying of all the salaries. I haven't done that yet.
You divide by 0.37 and you get all the salaries.
No, you multiply.
You multiply.
Let's say we're gonna have.
Of what salaries, Commissioner?
Our troopers who are currently doing the investigations for us. Those people, the people that are staffing the IED, those salaries I see as directly attributable to the effort of investigations during the time of the investigations.
Oh, I see. I thought that 37% was a 37% overhead charge on the hourly charge.
No. Oh, I'm glad you made that distinction. No, the 37%, and I haven't done that yet, would be applied only to the salaries of the commission's staff to determine the overhead. That's a commission cost.
So it'd be the total commission salaries,
Right.
37% of the total commission salaries divided by what period of time?
6 months, if that's what the investigations take. Perhaps 7 months, rather, I stand corrected, because we started this effort a little bit before the actual investigation with scope of licensing meetings and whatnot.
But if one applicant's investigation takes 2 months, then this question is, this next question that you posed is designed to say whether that applicant should pay 2 months' worth of that overhead or 9% of it.
What, 9%?
11.
111.
111. In other words, do we divide the number that
yes,
you just
111.
described by
Yep.
11?
Correct.
And assess everybody the same amount, whether their investigation took 2 months or 7 months?
Correct.
Only
Or-
he's not really using length of time, he's using dollars as the
Yes.
proxy for.
I was using
effort.
dollars, but
So
it's,
if we estimate that the
But-
applicant A is gonna cost $1.2 million, and applicant B is gonna cost $400,000, then applicant A would have 3 times as much overhead. He's using dollars rather than length as the proxy.
No,
for
I
that.
understand, for the proxy, but to get the total number, you're using a length of time,
yes,
right? You're
Yes.
using 6 months or 7 months.
Yes.
To get the pot,
correct.
and then you take that pot and either divide it up on a straight 9% per applicant basis, or
Correct.
in proportion to the actual charge you've made to the applicant for the applicant's investigation.
Right.
Yes, number one,
Right.
the direct costs.
Right.
Which is a little bit what the chairman was
Yeah,
saying.
no, that's right. Either of those two.
Either of those two. Now, my point is that while the direct costs that our consultants will be spending on investigations are directly proportional to the level of effort of investigations, number of entities, number of qualifiers, I don't see that necessarily, but it's, it could really go either way, that our own costs, including our overhead, are directly proportional to the level of effort, which is why I believe we could go either way. We're still having the meetings, we still have to send letters, we still have to respond to responses, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's only a projection at this time.
But in every other context, the overhead charge bears some relationship to the charges made individually to the person being charged the overhead, right?
Direct.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
I suppose until you were asking about it, another methodology that I did not, I had not anticipated could be to try to come up with a number, let's call it 40%, after analyzing all of the commission costs and apply that 40%, say, to each of the fees on line item number 1, which are all the direct costs. This way would be entirely proportional.
Well, it would be the same as, wouldn't that net out to the same as just doing it as a percent
Right.
relative to the totals?
Right.
Because you're just either gonna apply 40% to each of the individuals, or you're gonna apply 40% to the total number. I think you'd get to the same place doing what you just got through saying.
You get pretty close anyway.
Yeah,
May very well.
maybe not. I don't know, I'm not sure that, none of these is perfect, because the smaller workload could actually be a lot more workload at our office if the qualifiers are really late and there's an awful lot of back and forth, and might have hearings and, so it's kind of hard to come up with a really true measure. I kind of lean towards doing it pro rata against the labor effort, sort of seems logical, but I certainly wouldn't go to war on that point.
No, this is not a warmongering exercise. But I agree with that. I think that, I think that the proportional just has the feel of fairness and sort of what one would expect the overhead charges to be billed on. Well, you're right. But so for that reason, I would favor that.
Okay.
I do too. Maybe what we ought to do is say, this is our presumption, tell it to Maria, and if she's got a better idea, she can tell us about it. But we're leaning towards this
A
point.
proportionality of commission costs relative to the direct costs.
And I know, Commissioner, you have spoken to or are going to speak to some other individuals who have done this in other jurisdictions,
That's right.
correct?
That's right.
That may be helpful as well.
Well, and we talked about it with our consultants too, to know
did.
that we're not going outside the normal
Correct.
box. These costs are routinely, these kinds of allocations are routinely done
In this,
but for background checks. So
Correct.
we're not breaking any new mold here, or breaking the old mold. Okay.
Well, the third and final point for consideration is one where Commissioner McHugh, since I submitted this for consideration, alerted me to a specific section in our regs that has a specific bearing here. But at least at the time, I was considering that in the event that fees are forecasted to exceed what's available for the effort, $350,000 in the case of every applicant. There are perhaps two ways to collect those additional fees, and I was suggesting that as per discussions with our consultants, we could communicate the difference and ask that it be replenished in advance, or we could determine a minimum amount in an account under which the balance should never go below, and ask our applicants to replenish accordingly. The particular section in our regs does speak to what would appear to be the latter. The language is specifically 100,000 as a minimum balance to be maintained, after which, or as we get under that, the commission will then communicate the costs to the applicant that would have to be replenished for that account.
as a minimum, so we could,
Yes.
if we felt like, I think what we're trying to avoid here is any kind of a stoppage in progress with the background investigations due to financial constraints.
Right.
And we don't want to be a collection agency.
Correct. In looking at these two options, thought that the second option made a lot of sense, because I think what it does is it allows us to have a more accurate forecast. Because as we're working on the investigation, those numbers will change. Because as in any investigation, you're just not sure. One thing could lead to something else, which is time-consuming, requires additional staffing hours. So I think if we follow your second recommendation, we'll be well into the investigation when we've expended, say, $200,000, and we'll have a more accurate forecast in which to go back to our applicants and say, okay, this is where we are, this is how we've spent the money, and this is our request for additional funds, and because this is what's remaining in the investigation. So it's just more accurate than our forecasts that are initial, which really don't include any work that's already been done.
Let me just, the conversation, we talked about this at great length with the consultants, and typically what's done is the investigative agency does a one-time assessment, a one-time projection of what the total cost will be and goes to the developer and says, it's gonna be $1 million, and so we need our $1 million. Now, we've got our 400,000 up front, which is unusual, but we were originally urged to just, however much more is we think is gonna be required to get it at one time. There was another school of thought which says we could take it easy on the developers and do it, sort of replenish our bucket every time it gets down to 200,000 or 100,000, whatever the threshold is. And I think we ended up not liking that idea because that just is too complicated. There's too many calls for money. So the middle ground we talked about, which I think is what you were anticipating here, is that we tell the developers what the estimated cost is. We now have a deposit of 400,000, of which 350 goes towards the background. When that 350 goes down to X, and maybe it's required by law at 100,000 rather than 2, I'm not sure.
By regs, yep.
By reg. Then we go back to the developer and say, okay, the balance is now due. So there's 1 second transaction. It's not a continual replenishing of the bucket. And if there's money left over at the end, we return it. If it turns out we need a little bit more at the end, then we get it. But it's basically designed to be only one additional ask, and that comes once we hit that $100,000 threshold. That was, and I think from the consultant standpoint, that was a good compromise, a good place to be.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the regs permit that. The regs say
The
that
regs
once you
permit
get
that.
down to, you can require a balance of at least 100,000 against which the
Oh, at least
commission.
100, so you could make it 200.
Yes.
You could make it 200, you could make it 1 million.
Right.
And you could make it consistent with the regs. It doesn't have to be uniform. That was designed for some flexibility. There's an interest charge there. And then another portion of the reg says that once you, if the cost of the investigation exceed the initial application fee, and you bill the applicant, if they don't pay within 30 days, you have the right to deny the application. So that helps with the collection.
Right, good point.
Right.
Okay, so I think we can go back to the plan that the middle ground plans, make it 200,000. When each kitty goes down to 200,000, we will then send a request for the balance due based on whatever our projection at the moment is for the total cost.
And one more transaction, not any number.
Right, not any number, just the one more transaction, unless there's something left at the end to fine tune things.
And as we're all, just to reiterate, it would be based on our best forecast at that time.
Correct.
I wouldn't want us to wait until we've incurred that cost, for example, or dispersed it, but rather when we've committed that cost.
Right. And many, not all, but most of
Will likely
our
comply.
bidders have been through this before. I mean,
Yes.
they understand that these are, we're guessing, we're doing our best guess.
But we'll keep a clear accounting of our costs.
Right.
And that will be provided to the applicants. And again, if it costs less than we had anticipated, that money's returned. I think that's,
Right. Okay. I don't think we need a motion
I
for
don't.
that. I think
I
it's
don't
just a
either.
process
Just-
for going forward, but we've agreed, I think, on the,
The regs basically provide for this.
For this,
and-
right.
and provide for posting a schedule, provide for
Assessing commission costs
assessing
and indirect
commission
costs.
costs and everything, so,
what good regs we wrote.
great regs.
Okay. Anything else, Commissioner? Public education information. Ombudsman Ziemba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I continue to have meetings and conversations with applicants and communities, including some of the more recent filings. We're trying to get as much information as we can out to all of these entities. For example, as I reported last week, Mr. Grossman and I attended a sort of a very well-attended forum hosted by the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission that included all of those above parties. We continue to receive general questions regarding our process, but more particular questions regarding funding and timing issues. In regard to the funding issue, I will report that the community disbursements language that we submitted last week, we have received the comments back from the Department of Revenue Division of Local Services, and the comments were minor and not material. We anticipate that we'll be posting that grant and that process within the next day or so. So hopefully that addresses a lot of the questions out there about how to get funding for consultants to evaluate impacts. We have been working with a number of different regional planning agencies to get out the draft surrounding communities definition. They've been very helpful to us in that regard, and I believe that we'll be doing further mailings on that in the next day or so. The bulk of my time, I'd like to just devote to one issue in regard to timing. We continue to receive a number of questions regarding the timing of our process, and we always point them to the chart that we've developed here that includes all of our anticipated deadlines, our anticipated filings.
Excuse me, John, is the current chart up on the website? I know there was a while when it was not current. Does anybody? Okay. Let's just check and make sure that, because we are referring people to it, we don't want to refer people to the wrong one. Okay, sorry.
So particularly, we get questions about the commission's directive on that no referendum shall occur until the end of the scope one, the phase one licensing process. Commissioner Cameron and I recently met with our consultants in order to try to find out how we can get out the best and the most accurate advice to communities within the context that what we're dealing with are projections, the scope of licensing, our licensing investigations. It's a fluid matter, so it's very difficult to project when they will actually be completed, but perhaps I can turn to Commissioner Cameron to give us a little more detail about that conversation.
Yeah. As we all know, our consultants were here the last couple of days, and in conjunction with the state police, we really worked hard to find out with each and every applicant where we were in the process, what additional documentation was needed, and really try to apportion our investigative resources in a way that would give us a forecast. At this time, as we've announced before, we really are going to, direct resources so that we can focus on the Category 2 licenses, the slots, and be in a position to complete those. We're looking at a 3-month period there. Now, with the resort casinos, the Category 1, and this all has to do, I know, with all the questions John has been receiving about referendum votes and when can those be scheduled. It is our goal to work hard to have investigations completed end of May, early into June, have presentations in June for the full commission to determine suitability. Of course, there's time built into the schedule for hearings. It's our understanding that certainly if an applicant is deemed suitable, there would not be a hearing. So we're looking at some time saved at that point if that's the case.
Let me just focus on this, because I think this is worth everybody. I think that these ties to the questions that John is getting. Right now, our plan is, this is the award of the Category 2 license, and that is scheduled for December 1st. And for the time being, communities can count on that as a reasonable deadline. We are working, what Commissioner Cameron has just now said, about shortening the background check phase, this green phase, which is as long as 6 months. We're going to try to shorten that to as little as 3 months. If we do that, we can, and then even nothing else changes, we can pull back the license date by some number of, for Category 2, by some number of months. Certainly 1 or 2, possibly even a little bit more. And we're not ready to move that stake in the ground yet, but that's what we're working towards, and within the next week or two, we hope we'll be able to do that. So for people, now to your point, this is the way I understand this, John, and I'm not sure if this is right or not. what I think we have said is, we are not gonna preclude a community from setting a date for their referendum, which assumes the reality of our targeted dates. They will be taking a risk if they do that. It might not be very smart to do that, because we'll never be able to guarantee until things are finally done that we actually will be able to make that final date, even on the slots, which is just the one. And I think we will advise people, if a community is thinking about it and we think they're off their rocker, we'll say so, but it's up to them. If we move the deadline back, let's say we move the deadline back to September 1st, we, I think, are taking the position that, although we don't particularly encourage it, if a community wanted to target a referendum for shortly after September 1st,
No, that date is after
Before
after the phase 2. The referendum would come after phase 1. The suitability, so.
I'm sorry,
so-
I'm sorry.
Suitability is in July, not.
Yeah, I'm sorry, right, I'm sorry.
But,
No.
no,
No, that's not.
that's right.
Yes,
No.
It would-
we've said that we would, what we've determined is that the suitability, the referendum will not occur, that vote will not be taken until after
After the
we've made a determination of suitability.
Correct.
So, that's what we're trying to help
Okay,
people
I'm
understand the
sorry, I'm sorry.
dates,
Right.
so that they may have a
Right,
better
right,
understanding of when that vote could occur.
Right, I'm sorry, I screwed that all up, I apologize.
So
You're
the-
absolutely right.
The suitability is for 7/25 at this point.
Approval, is it here,
Yeah, 7/25.
That's the approval currently,
of suitability?
suitability.
Right.
For category 2.
I'm sorry. And we might be able to move that one back.
Yeah.
But at the
Depending.
moment, people should assume,
Much as
can plan on.
Much as I.
So one of the questions is that the approval that we have here on our chart, that follows the hearing period, and as Commissioner Cameron just said, there may actually be no hearing period,
Right.
depending on the applications.
Right.
And even if there is a hearing period, we may be able to squeeze down the amount of time that we assign to that.
Right. Right. I apologize for screwing this up. So this date is what, 7/15?
7:25.
7/25. So at the moment, we are planning, or we are committed to having the suitability decision by July 25th.
Well, again, this was never a commitment, this chart, this was a forecast.
Right.
So, and the reason I hesitate is because you really never know what's going to happen in an investigation. But we are forecasting, we do have, we have done a lot of work, especially in the last couple of weeks, because we've had most of the scope of licensing determinations made, which allows us to look at the number of qualifiers, the number of entities, and have a better forecast of a time frame for an investigation. Now, I want to throw a couple of things out. One is, and every applicant knows where they are in the process as of right now, and they know the documentation they need to get to us. So, this is a process which is a two-way process, and what I mean by that is the sooner people get us that additional documentation, the more we're able to streamline that background investigation. If things are very slow getting to us, it really does hold up that background investigation, which then could possibly throw our numbers off and hold everybody else up, frankly. So, but we've had a good working relationship with all of the applicants as far as dialogue and assurances that the paperwork will be in, the additional documentation. So all of that is helping us, give us some better ideas, which we hope would then in fact help municipalities try to plan for this vote, which they all have to schedule at some point. So what we're trying to do here today is give us, just a better idea of where we are, the timeframes we think we'll be able to meet with our investigations teams. And again, and the other piece of that, if there are really significant issues, that could add some time to this too. So I want to stress that this is a forecast, and that timing is such that we will try to meet those forecasts, but.
Okay, so in that context, how should John advise a
community about when they can set the
Well,
date for their referendum?
Again, our goals are, if, and it's, these are aggressive timetables to complete investigations. We could be looking at, early May for slots and late May into early June for category one. And then the next step would be.
Commissioner Karen, can I ask a
Yes.
question? The May report, which is the completion of the IEB report, which will then
Correct.
be turned to the commission. I don't know if we've determined that then becomes the public document until after until after the commission actually looks at it as part of the public meeting?
Oh, absolutely. All that is at that point is an investigation report. A document will be prepared for each commissioner for review, and then there will be a public hearing in which, a presentation, in which the whole report, everything will be explained. So that everyone.
When the IEB recommends to the commission, you're talking about?
Yes, and I think that some decisions that we haven't made yet are along the lines of presentations by the applicants to the full commission. So there are a few things here that we have to make final determinations about, but yes, there'll be a time for the commissioners to review that report. But we're just trying to, in speaking with our consultants this week and in looking at what we think, we're really aiming to, to get the end of May into the beginning of June, those completed reports, which then, we'll need a couple of weeks, obviously, to get those presentations, to have that hearing, the full commission to hear about that investigation in order that the commission may vote on suitability. And then after that, of course, the municipalities would be free to vote at that level after suitability.
Can I just offer one observation to build on what Commissioner Cameron has said? And I think we can be more precise and be more helpful with this projection. We can't be precise because these are targets, but if you look at the orange line, the red line, and right in that area there, we can be more precise and I think more helpful there. That top line is prepare and submit applications for Category 2. The preparation can start now, but the deadline is going to be whatever the application deadline is. So that's going to move in relation to whether we change the overall deadline. The next line down is surrounding community agreements are executed. They have to be executed ideally by the time the application is submitted. They can begin work on that anytime now, so we could extend that line back and show people that they can do it now. And if they're not executed by the time the application is submitted, then we take over and there's a 30-day period to force their execution. The next line down is host community agreements approved by referendum. Now that is one in which the host community agreement has to be executed, if I think about this correctly, at least 60 days before the vote is held. The vote could be held the day before the application is submitted, but the agreement has to be executed 60 days before. So those really ought to be two separate lines.
It's actually, I don't know if this matters, it's 60 days from the request for and a vote.
Yes, that's right, that's more precise,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay.
The host community agreement has to be executed, then the governing body has to request a vote. One would assume that those two would come
Very
very
close
close.
together.
So we could add another line there that shows when the host community agreement had to be executed by in relation to when the agreement deadline was. And it basically would have to be about 60 days or a little more before the application deadline, so that the statutory baking period would be satisfied. But the host community agreement can be negotiated and signed at any time up to that 60-day deadline. And then the scheduling of the host community agreement is the host community referendum is the thing that the communities would have to gamble on a little bit, but at least they could look at that, recognizing in a chart form that they had to begin to think about scheduling it 60 days before the application deadline. Then if we move the application deadline back, all of that stuff slides back synchronously so that the dates remain the same. So I think we could do that in an updated chart fairly quickly, and I think it'd provide probably as much help as we could get and
Right.
give at the moment.
And when he says, when he is asked by a community, we want to schedule, your approximate deadline is, at the moment, it's 7/25.
Yes.
We want to schedule it for our vote for August 1st. John says what?
John says that under the current schedule, we are projecting a completion of those investigations by 7/25. We can't guarantee it. So you may schedule that vote for August 1st, but you're taking a risk if you do.
And I would further
And
clarify.
we will update
As we can.
generically as we can to help you, but at the moment, that's the best information we can give you.
Right, and I would further clarify that July date includes the hearing period, and potentially, if there are no appeals, then the date of our issuance of suitability may occur as
2
much
months.
as a month or
2
even
months early,
further.
yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think
Sooner.
we have an obligation, I think, as we've discussed before, to try to get the best information we can about when the investigations are likely to finish, and then, and there's some more water to be wrung out of those other dates there, and to compress that schedule, to make up time and give people a better estimate of when they can go. But we can do that within a relatively short period, I would think.
So I would recommend that we issue another host and surrounding communities advisory in the near future that includes this new information, just so everybody has available, and it's on our website. So I can work on that, make sure that the language is accurate to everybody's understanding, and we get that out. And we can also work on making sure that the chart reflects the understanding today.
And the point about, that you added on, that if there isn't a hearing, it is, if, whether there is likely to be a hearing or not, the developer will know as much about that as anybody. Because they'll know whether they're going to agree with, if there's still a debate going on about qualifiers and stuff, so.
Exactly, yeah.
So they'll presumably be communicating with the community. They wouldn't let a community go ahead and schedule it if they knew there was going to be contest over.
Exactly, yeah.
Over a qualifier or something.
And another piece of this is, in other, it's the experience, this is what's happened in other jurisdictions. There may be one or two individuals that may be deemed unsuitable. And in many other jurisdictions, those people are dropped from the project, so that the.
Right, it doesn't kill the project, they just
Correct.
replace the
Correct,
qualifier.
and then in other circumstances that I'm aware of, there was a suitability determination without an individual. New information was presented at a later date, which deemed that individual suitable, and at a later date, they were added back into the project. So in other words, if there's a particular hearing that has to occur on an individual, that doesn't necessarily have to hold up the entire project.
Right.
If they, the applicant deems to drop that person because they were
Right.
at that time. So
Right.
there's many ways
Right.
that in other jurisdictions, these issues have been handled without holding up the entire process for everyone involved.
I think we're torturing ourselves to not preclude them, a community, from scheduling a referendum with a guess as to when we will make our final suitability decision. But the more we talk about it, the more unwise it seems, I think. And I think we're also trying to leave it as sort of a generic schedule, and it's really going to be very idiosyncratic on a case-by-case basis. But, so you're not going to be able to give people very much satisfaction, everybody's going to want that time frame to be moved back, and it's just gonna be tough to do.
And you're right, communities need to be advised that it is at their risk if
Right.
they choose to make that determination.
Right.
Well, and the risk would be, though, that they schedule one and they're not able to have it then, and they'd have to schedule another one.
Right.
A number of weeks later.
Right.
That would be the,
That's the downside, yeah.
Do we have an indication as to how much time does it take for communities to schedule a special election? I guess I always tied it to the 60 days, but that is not the case in terms of scheduling an election.
That might be, I might need to do further research on that. I don't know if perhaps a lot of the planning could be done in advance of when they actually put out the request for the
Right.
Election. So that may not delay things, but that's worthy of further research. Are there specific statutory deadlines or other deadlines that might otherwise interfere with a quick scheduling?
Right.
It's worth looking into, but my guess is that the legislature knew what it was doing when it put in that 60 days. And if there was some problem, the Secretary of State would have said, hey, you can't do it in 60 days, it's gonna have to take you whatever, but
Right.
you could check on it, but I imagine it's okay.
Plus postponement of an election, because this wasn't done on time. I mean, it wasn't done at the projected time, and then rescheduling potentially gives rise to a host of its own problems.
Yeah.
Adding further to the unwisdom of
Right.
doing it
Of doing
until
it.
there's more certainty as to when it's gonna be available.
Is it also fair to say a community could run the risk of, again, scheduling the election before the suitability comes out, and then, if I'm not mistaken, the election is turned down, and people may choose to vote against a project because they don't know the suitability of the applicant, but that puts them in a 6-month waiting window before
Well,
they
they couldn't have the election without the suitability.
Right.
We wouldn't let them have the referendum.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I have to report.
Right, okay. Any other questions for Ombudsman
Thank you.
Ziemba? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, do you want to, in the interest of time, do you want to have your guests come up out of order? I'd hate to have them sit and wait through all the rest of our stuff.
I think that makes sense.
Okay?
Yeah. I invite up Mark Sylvia from the Department of Energy Resources and Galen Nelson from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. As we all know, the statute has a number of provisions with respect to the resort destination casinos being built with lead guidelines as well as energy efficiency as key components. We know that these facilities, because of the nature of their operation, are pretty heavy utility users. And we've discussed our interest both in previous meetings and our policy discussions about how we can make sure that these facilities are somewhat unique, and energy efficiency may be one aspect of appeal for these facilities as they go forward. I thought it was helpful to look around and consider state resources that might be available or are available to other businesses, and that we should make them available to our potential applicants. Energy savings can certainly help an applicant turn a profit a little bit faster. Speaks to our mission about creating a robust gaming environment. So I thought it would be helpful to have the folks from DOER and the Clean Energy Center come in and talk about their possible role, how they may be able to assist applicants. Some other issues I know they want to put on our radar screen for consideration related to green communities and other topics, as well as their interest or willingness to meet with now our 11 applicants even directly to talk about how they might be of assistance. I have a write-up on the Clean Energy Center, but I know Galen can probably give a better intro of who the CEC is. I had a chance to work with Galen and the CEC out in Springfield. They were very helpful in getting some support for a building that was moving ahead with a geothermal project. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to them and have them go through their presentation. So Commissioner Sylvia, if you want to kick it off.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Stebbins and members of the Gaming Commission. Before I begin, I just want to identify the other members of our team who are here. Dwayne Breger, Dwayne, raise your hand. He's the Director of our Renewable Energy Division, and Ian Finlayson, who works in the Energy Efficiency Division. If there are any technical questions, they're here to help navigate through that. Also, yes.
Let me just say, there was one more point I wanted to add. We had given you guys some introduction at the meeting that the AIA hosted,
Yes.
but I felt it was more appropriate to allow you to spend a little more time in front of the commission and talk probably a little more in depth about how you might be helpful. That
Sure.
would have extended our forum out maybe a little bit longer, and that day was probably not
The best time for us to try to do that.
Sure. So very glad to be here to talk briefly about what we do and then to talk about the types of programs and incentives that may be available to the casino applicants as they go through the process with you here at the Commission. Real quickly, the Department of Energy Resources is one of 6 agencies within the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, which is headed by our Secretary, Rick Sullivan. And I know you've met with Maeve Valley Bartlett, who heads up MEPA for the Executive Office, and she has been designated by the Secretary to coordinate all of our agency efforts as it relates to the Gaming Commission and the casino application. So we are one of the agencies that is responsible within the Secretariat for focusing on the governor's overall agenda on clean energy. We are the State Energy Office. Right here, I've put up a slide for you on what our mission is. Among the things we're responsible for doing is to ensure the deployment of all cost-effective energy efficiency, and I'll go into a little more detail on that momentarily. Maximize the development of clean energy resources, and I won't go through all of them, but at the end of the day, we are the State Energy Office, and our overall responsibility is to help support the governor's clean energy agenda. We're divided into 4 divisions within our agency: the Energy Efficiency Division, the Energy Markets Division, Green Communities, and Renewable and Alternative Energy. And there are drivers for us that direct us in terms of the types of programs and services we are to provide across the Commonwealth. You may be familiar with the Green Communities Act, which was signed by Governor Patrick in 2008, which really catapulted Massachusetts to the head of the pack in terms of leading the nation on clean energy investments and clean energy strategies. It did a number of things, including creating the Green Communities Division, which is there to help all 351 cities and towns meet their clean energy goals. It required all of the investor-owned utilities in Massachusetts to provide all cost-effective energy efficiency before procuring additional supply or generation. And it established advanced building codes. The advanced building code focused on a statewide base energy code, as well as the creation of the stretch code, which I'll talk a little bit more about. That same year, the governor signed the Global Warming Solutions Act, which developed for us a pathway forward to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2020 and 80% by 2050. And then the governor, when he came into office, clean energy was a big part of his agenda, and he set a number of ambitious goals in the area of renewable energy development as well as efficiency. So I mention those to you because that's what drives all of the work that we do, and certainly what the Clean Energy Center does, and is the reason why there are a number of robust programs that are available to residents, businesses, and municipalities in the Commonwealth. And as a result of this, we have a really good story to tell. Here in Massachusetts, we're number 1 in energy efficiency among the 50 states, 3rd in private clean energy investments. Galen will talk, I'm sure, a little bit about the jobs report that the Clean Energy Center issues annually, but it shows that in Massachusetts, there are over 71,000 clean energy jobs, and there's been a significant increase over the last 2 years from where we were to where we are, and I believe it's the fastest growing job sector in Massachusetts. We have 110 designated green communities from Cape Cod to the Berkshires, including 3 of the communities for which you have casino developers who have applied for consideration by you. Boston, Springfield, and Palmer are all designated green communities, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. We have, it says here, 174 megawatts of installed solar. It's actually 194. And we have over 100 megawatts of wind generation. It says 61. So it's been a lot going on in the last several months. So give you a really quick bit of context as to why this is important to us and why Massachusetts has tools available. And now I want to try and put it into context for the work that you're doing here at the Gaming Commission. So as you're all very familiar with the gaming statute that was enacted by the legislature and signed by the governor, there is a provision within the gaming law under Section 18, subsection 8, which enables the commission to consider a number of sustainability principles in the applicants that are before you, or the applications that are before you. And there are 6 in particular that it references, and here I provide a summary of those 6 areas, those 6 sustainability concepts, which includes adoption of the stretch code, or building facilities to the stretch code, Energy Star-related equipment that's installed in the casino facilities, monitoring, metering of energy consumption within the facilities that are eventually approved, and the potential for LEED certification. And that's in the category of energy efficiency. In terms of renewable and alternative energy, it suggests the possibility of alternative transportation strategies, water conservation and stormwater management, and renewable on-site generation. So it's important to kind of lay out those 6 sustainability principles that are contained in the gaming bill, and to give a sense of what we can bring to bear in terms of programs and services and incentives to help strengthen those projects from a clean energy perspective. So I'll talk first about green communities, the Green Communities Division. There are 110 qualified designated green communities here in Massachusetts. They have to meet 5 very specific criteria in order to be designated. They have to adopt as-of-right siting for either renewable energy generation or R&D and manufacturing, and adopt an expedited permitting process for those uses. Create an energy reduction plan for their municipal buildings, that's both schools and municipal general government activities, and commit to reduce their energy consumption by 20% in 5 years. Purchase only fuel-efficient vehicles for government activities, and then adopt the stretch code, which we'll talk a little bit more in a moment. Just to give you a sense of where these green communities are, as I mentioned, it's from Cape Cod to the Berkshires, big communities, small communities, City of Boston, Springfield, Worcester, Lowell, and small communities like New Salem and Lakeville and others. We've been able to provide over $24 million to those 110 green communities to help them pursue their clean energy goals. And so in Palmer and in Boston and in Springfield, they're already doing a significant amount of work to meet their clean energy goals and are well-equipped and well understand the benefits of clean energy initiatives. In the energy efficiency area, which is particularly relevant to this discussion, I mentioned energy efficiency as our first fuel, that it is the law of the land that utilities have to provide all cost-effective energy efficiency. I don't need to tell you all that, of course, using less energy is our most beneficial strategy and our least expensive option to reducing energy costs over time. The energy efficiency programs that are provided for here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are provided through the Mass Save program. It's the coordinated efforts of our investor-owned utilities providing incentives and rebates across all sectors, residential, commercial and industrial, and municipal. In addition to the Mass Save program, which can support a number of different initiatives at each one of these customer segments, we have a Leading by Example program here, which is focused on state facilities, and I mentioned green communities. To give you a sense of scale in terms of how the energy efficiency programs are funded and how the availability of incentives and rebates work, I wanted to give you some context in terms of the 3-year plans that the utilities follow to implement the incentives and rebates that are provided. The first 3-year plan was from 2010 to 2012. They just completed their first 3-year plans. It gives you a sense of total investment, over $1.6 billion in investments, which has or will yield close to $6 billion in benefits over the life of the measures. For the next 3-year plans, which are before the Department of Public Utilities now, in which we anticipate they will provide their order, or issue their order by the end of this month. It's over $2 billion that will be invested over the next 3-year period in a number of different efficiency initiatives, again, across all customer classes. The benefits for the next 3-year plans are anticipated to be well over $8 billion. And you can see from this slide here, there's a significant amount of both electric and gas savings that are anticipated as a result of these investments. And so we're really excited about the next 3-year plans. The first 3-year plans have enabled us to really lead the way nationally and has helped us to get our #1 ranking. So for the purposes of commercial and industrial, which is the category that we would put the casino developments in, certainly, this is a great slide, a compelling slide in terms of investing in energy efficiency and what it yields in terms of benefits. So to give you a sense here, the green bar represents C&I. For every dollar that's invested in electric efficiency, it yields approximately a little over $6 in benefits over the life of the measures that are implemented. That's an amazing investment return for the amount of dollars that you put in up front, leveraged with incentives and rebates from the state, what it will yield in terms of benefits, which is, in a large sense, the savings that you realize from the measures that are implemented, but there are a number of other benefits that accrue to this as well over time. For gas, it's well over $3 in benefits for every dollar invested, and then you can see the combined total and the combined benefits there. So it's a very easy case to make, and it has, from our experience, yielded these kinds of results.
I'm sure I'm the only one in the room who doesn't know the answer to this, but what is C&I?
Commercial and industrial.
Okay, thank you.
So, as I mentioned before, the vehicle that we use to deliver these energy efficiency programs is Mass Save, which is the combined efforts of each of the investor-owned utilities in Massachusetts. It is a program, and you can see who the participating utility partners are. We put their names up here. But they serve a number of different types of projects, whether it's existing buildings, new infrastructure, retrofits, direct install programs. There are a number of tools that they provide across customer classes to enable the building owner to ultimately reduce their energy consumption and, at the end of the day, their overall energy costs. The types of programs that are available to commercial and industrial customers, I lay out here. We segment them into 3 buckets. Design for energy efficiency, so there's opportunity up front, and I'll use casino developments as an example, up front to work with the investor-owned utilities to help to design and develop their casino facilities. There is the opportunity for incentives for, as it says here, up to 50% of the cost of engineering studies. So we recognize that it's not just identifying what measures should be installed, but really working with the property owner well in advance to help them to design systems that are the most efficient systems and that will yield the most savings. On new construction, there are programs that are provided by the utilities to support new construction as opposed to retrofits, which is also a very important segment that we have here. It's our biggest, of course, is existing buildings, existing commercial industrial buildings. So we have programs that address issues in existing buildings to the retrofit program. We have programs to support new construction. And at the end of the day, as I mentioned, design for energy efficiency is an important beginning component to this, and there is support and funding available for that.
What is the 75% new construction incentive?
Incentives up to 75% of incremental costs related to the existing code.
What is that?
So the incremental cost is the delta between what you would normally have paid and what the building code, the energy building code is. So the delta between those two, correct, Ian?
Yeah, so if you get a price on just building to the code minimum, the worst building you can build, and then you look at doing something better than that, the utility will fund 3/4 of the cost of going beyond the code.
So it says up to, is it pretty much 3/4? That's, or is
Well,
that?
it depends on the type of the
It does
project,
depend a great deal.
Oh, okay.
but the maximum would be up to 75%.
Now, is that funding in advance, or is it a grant, in effect? I mean, is it a construction loan that's to be paid back over the life of the project, or is it
It's a
money that
rebate,
the?
normally.
It's generally, the funds are awarded as you hit milestones. So the design funding is designed for the design period, and new construction, as you hit construction milestones. In most cases for energy efficiency incentives, they're going to come in one chunk at the end of the project.
Right,
But it's something you can plan on and you can take to the bank.
okay, so it's a grant, it's not a loan,
Exactly.
That's right.
okay.
And is this pretty common knowledge? Does everybody know, do all developers know this, know about these things?
So the Mass Safe, I mean, it's ultimately our responsibility to promote and inform each customer class. It's also the utility's responsibility. So we focus very heavily on education. However, there's always improvement and outreach. So we want to do as much as we can to certainly let your applicants know and be aware of what's available. And I think this
Is that part
forum
of
is
your-
is the purpose of that. And I know Commissioner Stebbins and I talked about the opportunity of us meeting individually with each one of the applicants to kind of walk through this presentation, but also have our technical team available to answer any questions that they may have.
Yeah.
Great.
So I'll go real quickly, because I know time is limited, and we've got to get Galen up here, too. I mentioned in the Green Communities Act that we now have an established base energy code in Massachusetts. That base energy code is applicable to all 351 cities and towns. It's consistent with the IECC, which is an international energy code. It changes as that code changes, the base energy code changes. So we're currently under the 2009 IECC code. That has changed, and so we're working through the process with the BBRS to update the base energy code. But it makes, again, Massachusetts a leader in energy codes. Energy codes are a big driver for efficiency. This is a map of the 122 stretch code communities. So I mentioned the base code. Communities, by local option, can actually go deeper, if you will, than the base energy code. 20% deeper than in terms of ability to reduce energy consumption by up to 20% by adopting the stretch code. There are 110 green communities, as I mentioned. They've adopted the stretch code because that is a requirement, but there are an additional number of municipalities that have adopted the stretch code as well, which again has helped to catapult Massachusetts to leading the way. The stretch code, I just mentioned it, I don't have to go any further. It's 15 to 20% more efficient than the existing base code, which is the law here in Massachusetts. LEED, there is reference in the gaming statute to LEED. We just wanted to bring to your attention that the stretch code interacts with LEED from an building energy perspective. They both use ASHRAE as a modeling component, both the stretch code and LEED. So we wanted to mention that because it's referenced in the statute. MEPA, we play a role in the MEPA process. You heard from Director Bartlett recently about the role of MEPA in this whole process. We play a role as it relates to the greenhouse gas impacts of developments. That's whether it's the developments that you will ultimately approve or any others that go through MEPA. We review and analyze the greenhouse gas emission impacts of those developments, as well as building protocols. I only mentioned high-performance buildings. I think Galen will talk a little bit more about this, only to inform the commission that in Massachusetts, we take very seriously the fact that we have these robust programs and we have these very strong goals. And the governor was very clear that if we're going to ask businesses and residents to meet these goals, and we have to do the same thing at the state level. And so the Leading by Example program and an executive order that he signed requiring us to lead by example at the state level has yielded great results, one of which has been our focus on high-performance buildings, zero net energy buildings. And there are two examples that we can point to today. One that is in existence now at North Shore Community College, and another one that is we broke ground on recently out in Westboro, the new headquarters for Fish and Wildlife, which will also be a state zero net energy building. And we mention that because as we think outside of the box, and as you're thinking outside of the box, and the casino community is thinking outside of the box in terms of sustainability principles for development, we just want to point to two really good examples, one that's in development and one that has been developed here in Massachusetts, that are probably good examples to use for creative ways to design facilities so that you are consuming at your facility, you're generating all of the energy you need to consume all in the same location, which is in essence what the concept of zero net energy is. Quickly for renewables, which is the other side of our house, we have a number of tools that are available and incentive programs that are available to support renewable energy development. We have the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which supports renewable energy development. It's divided into two classes. Post the Restructuring Act in 1998, any renewable energy in Class 1, for example, wind and solar, that is developed after that date is supported by the portfolio standard under Class 1. In essence, this sets a requirement for utilities and competitive suppliers to purchase a certain amount of their power from renewable sources. And those renewable sources are qualified under our portfolio standard, and it generates renewable energy credits. Those renewable energy credits help to finance projects. We have the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, which supports technologies like combined heat and power. We have other tools that were established through the Green Communities Act, like net metering, which I won't go into detail. And both CEC and DOER have a number of programs, whether it's the Solar program or programs that we provide to help further incent the development of renewables. And it's applicable. Each one of these programs is applicable to casino projects that are being contemplated. Just to brag once more, when the governor came into office, there were less than 3 megawatts of installed solar PV. As of the end of 2012, we're up to 194 megawatts. And it is because of the collective efforts of policymakers, businesses, and residents, and the clean energy community that have really allowed this to happen. And we can continue that trajectory with these types of projects as well. Renewable thermal is another option. We have incentives that are provided for renewable thermal, like combined heat and power, biomass, geothermal heat pumps, solar, hot water, a number of different technologies that we are providing through pilot programs. So there may be other programs that developers can take advantage of. Transportation initiatives, that's another big piece, both from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective and from an alternative transportation perspective. We have a number of programs to support the deployment of alternative fuel vehicles, charging stations for EV, and so there are resources that are available as well there. I'll stop there. I know I've gone on for some time, but we're really excited about this opportunity. My staff and I are here to answer any questions, and again, we're more than willing to sit with the Clean Energy Center and some of our other colleagues with each one of the applicants to give them further detail.
That's great. Thanks.
Are we doing this in some formal way, or how are you going to try to make those links happen?
Well, at last week's meeting, I think you and I discussed that we need to come up with a laundry list of entities that applicants should make themselves available to.
Right.
And I believe that the good folks here, who I have the good fortune of working with in my prior career, would
Be one of
a good
those
idea
people,
for them.
yeah. So, yeah,
But we'll include them on our
Right.
list of those
Okay.
organizations.
good.
Sorry, it's just going to take me a moment here to set up.
Good time.
I have a question then. The 110 cities and towns that you spoke about, are they, as part of their efforts to meet the 20% goal, are they requiring all new building that are permitted in that municipality to meet these standards?
So as it relates to the stretch energy code, because they have to adopt the stretch energy code, yes, that's a requirement that commercial construction, I think it's over 100,000 square feet, as well as new residential construction have to meet those standards. As it relates to the 20% reduction plan, the focus is solely on municipal facilities, so schools, libraries, et cetera. But the stretch code is the energy code for that community, so everyone would have to comply with that. Otherwise, it's the base energy code in other communities. You want me to sing, tell a few jokes?
Yeah, I don't know. Fortunately, not able to. Do you have any ideas?
We can, if if you're gonna be working on that for a while, we can do other stuff while you're working on it.
Oh, that's it, yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Thanks, thank you. There you go.
Just do the show and you're good.
Great. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Commissioner Stebbins, Chairman, members of the Commission, thank you for this opportunity. I just want to begin by saying something that I'll repeat at the end, which is that, to echo Mark's comments, we really look forward to working with individual developers to explore a wide array of clean energy strategies that are appropriate for the various sites being considered. Really look forward to that conversation. I'm going to run through this quickly. I'm going to try, to the best of my ability, not to repeat a lot of what Mark said. We are sister agencies, if you will, and we do work very closely together and collaborate. And just want to underscore a lot of what Mark said and build on that a bit. First, a little bit of background on the Mass Clean Energy Center. We were established under the Green Jobs Act of 2008. And I'm not going to read all these slides, I think in the interest of time. But this provides you a sense of what our mission is and what our primary goals are. We are dedicated to accelerating the success of the clean energy economy here in the Commonwealth. And I'll speak a little bit more about what that industry actually looks like and its impacts on our overall economy in a moment. Some of our major programs, we do provide incentives and feasibility study funding for a wide range of renewable energy deployment, including solar, wind, organic waste to energy, hydropower, and solar thermal. We do, in fact, make direct investments in clean energy companies here in the Commonwealth. We support a wide array of clean energy workforce development programs. We also support the renewable energy industry and its related ecosystem, the companies, the R&D facilities that support it, the academic institutions that are the locations where startup companies spin out of into our incubators. We support all of those activities through a range of programs. We also operate and have built some infrastructure. The wind technology testing facility located in Charlestown, the largest wind blade test facility in North America, which is integral to the wind industry globally, actually. And we are beginning to construct the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal, which will support our offshore wind industry going forward. So that provides kind of a high-level overview of what we do and who the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center is. So I wanted to again underscore everything Mark said about our nation-leading programs and incentives related to energy efficiency, building energy efficiency, and renewable energy, but also add a little bit more of a kind of business lens to this discussion. Casino development, as I'm sure you all know at this point, provides an opportunity for the state to shine, again, as it has in so many other spheres, to set a new national standard for high performance in casino development that delivers triple bottom line benefits to owners, customers, and communities. And of course, I've listed here some of the benefits of high performance buildings. The number of high performance buildings in the state, both new construction and retrofits of existing buildings, has increased dramatically over the last decade or so. And yes, the forward-thinking policies, our nation-leading policies and incentives that Mark described have played a critical role. But I also want to underscore that market forces have also driven adoption of the LEED rating system and high-performance construction generally, because building owners and developers increasingly recognize the value of high-performance building that it delivers to both owners and tenants. Owners consistently enjoy higher lease rates per square foot, higher building sale price, because operating costs and vacancy rates are both lower. So simply put, a green or high-performance building is good business, and I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. So while we absolutely are committed to and are very proud of our greenhouse gas reduction goals and our clean energy goals, and they are indeed nation-leading. Our track record on clean energy and high-performance building leadership also makes good business sense. It helps drive our economy. And there are just a few more figures here. These are from McGraw-Hill Construction. Again, business perspectives on and drivers for high-performance building, green building, LEED construction. And of course, high-performance building, as Mark said, begins with good design. And I want to just make sure that while we are talking about the energy efficiency and renewable energy economy here in Massachusetts and the many jobs it creates, I want to make sure that we don't leave out the excellent design and engineering talent that we have here in the Commonwealth, and that is absolutely part of our clean energy economy. Some of the highest performing buildings in the world were in fact designed and engineered by firms located here in the Commonwealth, and we would urge developers to tap that rich talent pool from the start. So Mark mentioned the jobs report, and I've highlighted the figures again here. Just want to underscore that again, that this isn't just about meeting certain energy or environment or greenhouse gas reduction goals, but the Massachusetts clean energy economy is actually a critical part of our overall state's economy, and it's growing more rapidly. And I would add to Mark's comments, growing during the recession with impressive growth and a wide range of job opportunities. So in addition to providing benefits for building owners and tenants, and in this case, those tenants would be casino patrons, high-performance casinos also create an opportunity to drive economic activity in this industry. So in addition to specifying the installation of established, fully commercialized high-performance building and clean energy products, casino developers can also be, and developments, can also be early adopters of emerging clean energy technology that's being developed right here in Massachusetts, from high-performance lighting systems, next-generation heating and cooling equipment, to cutting-edge renewable energy technologies. The startup companies that are incubating these technologies right here in the Commonwealth often have trouble identifying their first customer, and we help facilitate connections between those companies and early adopters, and we believe that given the multitude of uses, the complexity of these facilities, the energy loads at casino developments, that they would be excellent early adopters of homegrown Massachusetts clean energy technology, and we look forward to working with them on that score. I did want to point out, just shifting to renewables, Mark cited the statute. We believe and hope that the 10% on-site renewables goal is indeed a floor and not a ceiling, and that I think working together we can all do better. And there are in fact some examples here that I've shown of 2 casinos and then a convention center on the upper right there. And I added that given the similarity between the kind of campus style and load mix that one might find in a convention center, and the similarity to that of a casino development, where in fact those developers did dramatically exceed 10%. The Haraz Casino on the upper left, they recently completed a 1 megawatt actual ground-based solar installation that provides over a quarter of the energy consumption for that facility. The ground-based array at the bottom there is a 250 kW array, and again, the convention center there, that array also provides over a quarter of that facility's electricity. I will touch on solar financing in a moment, but I will mention here that in this case, the developer there, which happened to be a public entity, opted to work with a third-party provider of the solar, which owns and installed the solar on the roof of this facility and then is selling power through a 20-year power purchase agreement at a very competitive rate to the Convention Center Authority. So 2 goals have been met: energy reductions for the facility, energy savings. I guess I would argue 3 goals: energy savings for the owner and emissions reductions for the jurisdiction. So just wanted to call out those specific examples as they included casinos specifically. With regard to more specific resources that we could provide. With regard to solar PV, solar photovoltaics, panels that are producing electricity, the industry is very mature here in the Commonwealth, and financing tools are available. So we would, again, in the same way that we would urge developers to tap the rich design and engineering community in the state, we would urge developers to tap the rich solar design firm community, installers, and owners agents who can help casino developers navigate the many PV installation and finance options while tapping maximally available state and federal incentives. And I did call out that one example in Atlantic City of a third-party owned array, but developers may also, if the numbers pencil out, choose to own and operate their own solar arrays. With regard to solar thermal technology, solar panels that generate heat, either for water or space heating, that technology is mature, but the business models are less so. And solar thermal systems also require a bit more upfront engineering costs. So that is where we can step in, specifically to your question, and offer assistance with regard to feasibility study funding to help developers explore whether or not that particular application makes sense at their particular site and their particular facility. The same could be said of onshore wind development. Appropriately scaled and sited onshore wind turbines require feasibility studies. Again, we can help in that regard. Looking beyond the facility's boundaries and thinking about wind, casino developers could also provide leadership and realize long-term savings by entering into long-term power purchase agreements with community-scale wind developers around the Commonwealth, providing a community benefit beyond their parcel boundaries. And then finally, a more emerging technology, though widely deployed in Europe. Organics to energy technologies, including anaerobic digestion, can provide facilities with electricity and heat while consuming food and other organic waste, which would otherwise, of course, have to be shipped away. Casinos are likely to be strong candidates for such technologies that generate both heat and electricity, both, of course, needed in large volumes at casinos. And furthermore, developers could remain a little ahead of the regulatory curve as organic waste will be banned from landfills at some point in the near future from commercial facilities here in the Commonwealth. Finally, I just wanted to briefly touch on kind of looking ahead, in some ways looking back, at least with regard to combined heat and power, a very proven technology, which Mark referenced. Actually, the units on the lower left there are actually manufactured in Holyoke. So this is a wonderful example of a kind of a homegrown clean energy technology. Combined heat and power, again, being technology that uses typically natural gas, but could be other fossil fuels, to produce both heat and electricity very efficiently on site, improving, lowering emissions, improving efficiency, and reducing costs for building owners. But looking ahead around the world and across the Commonwealth, building owners, planners, and energy experts are beginning to realize the economic, environmental, and resiliency benefits that CHP and on microgrids or district energy systems offer. And these new networks expand our understanding and practice of high-performance buildings beyond the parcel level to the district scale. So they often integrate combined heat and power. And this new energy architecture provides, as I said, building owners with lower energy costs, lower emissions, more reliability, and resilience. And I think with Superstorm Sandy behind us, I think it would be a mistake not to think about the chance that casino development might play an integral role into the future of a district energy system at one or more of these sites, offering again to the building owner and to the community improved reliability, energy savings, and emissions reductions. So with that, I'd like to again emphasize what Mark said, which is that we look forward to being a resource to you and to casino developers, to sit down with all of you to be creative and innovative and think about how we can together design and build casinos that we can all be proud of.
Is there anything we can
well, I guess we can set standards, that's one thing, we can set minimums, we can set standards. We can encourage these folks to get together with you all. Is there anything else we can do? I mean, should we facilitate some kind of brainstorming? You know, I mean, it sounds like it's probably not necessary. If you get together with the companies themselves, and they must be thinking about this, is there anything else that we can do that's constructive?
No, I think you've laid out the most effective ways that we can work together. And,
Right.
you know, MAVE certainly, you know, as you continue to contemplate standards, you know, MAVE will be the point for the executive office. But I think the issues that you laid out are the ones that are going to be the most useful for all of us.
Well, I was going to ask a related question. As we are fine-tuning the evaluation criteria for the licenses that we will give out, and we are following Section 18 and other relevant sections for energy efficiency, among many other aspects of the legislation. At least I am debating this notion of trying to set standards or prerequisites, certain being prescriptive, perhaps, versus allowing for creativity of the applicants and allowing for competition, let's say, awarding extra points for those that get closer to net zero, et cetera. What can you offer in terms of insights relative to whether that's a false choice, first of all, or whether there's a clear role that we could continue this conversation, or we can benefit from your insights?
Well, I do think that that's part of what we have to think about internally within EEA, in terms of, you know, you're looking to us for some guidance on standards, and we can think about that and get back to you in terms of what we think makes the most sense, because certainly that's part of what you're going to have to wrestle with, is whether you're focused on standards that provide some prescriptive pathway, or whether you're allowing the opportunity for innovation that may not yield what you're hoping to see. So let us think about that. And as I said, MAVE will be kind of our overall point on that, what we would recommend.
Great.
I mean, we could, you could also identify objectives, right? And as opposed to pathways. And have a objective-based set of criteria, incentives for the closer you come to the objective. Is the technology, that the combined power and heat technology, sufficiently, does it have the capability to provide heat and power to a facility of the type that we're contemplating yet?
It would likely be an anchor.
What do you mean by that?
So it would be, the facility would still be grid connected, and please, you jump in, but it would provide an important additional source of energy and heat.
I think
more
Dwayne is our source matter expert, so he might be
Yeah, I
best.
mean, I would just add to that, I mean, combined heat and power is a very mature technology that wouldn't be classified as emerging. There's mature companies, all the big heating, ventilation, air conditioning companies around the country and the world offer combined heat and power technology, but there's also more distributed scale generation, combined heat and power on smaller scale as well. Quite a few of our university campuses have combined heat and power systems. I would say what's important for combined heat and power is that there is a robust and continuous heating load, and to the extent that depending on the casino design, there may be a tremendous amount of air conditioning load in the summertime and
Right.
heating, and some heating in
Right.
the wintertime.
Right.
So also keep in mind combined heat and power can provide cooling as well,
Right.
through absorption chillers, which basically take heat and deliver cooling with that heat. So combining a combined heat and power system with absorption chilling is a very good way to really reduce electric power demands, because you reduce all the cooling from the grid and provide that with the combined heat and power plant, and then the electricity from the CHP unit can really be used for the lighting and the gaming.
And is the success of this technology based on its cost effectiveness or on other considerations?
Well, I mean, the cost effectiveness can be there, particularly in Massachusetts where we have actually a double incentive for combined heat and power. We have incentives through our energy efficiency, the Mass Save
Right,
programs,
right.
which can reduce the capital cost
Right.
of the technology. And then through our alternative portfolio standard, there's a credit that a CHP unit can receive based on its operation year after year after year.
I think I would add that particularly in new construction, both CHP and solar PV are very profitable right now with the incentives available. So as long as you understand the business opportunity, it's a no-brainer. But a lot of developers, particularly out-of-state developers, wouldn't be familiar with the local incentives. And so I think that's the education barrier that we're trying to bridge. After that, other technologies, the business case is going to be case by case. The CHP and solar PV are pretty straightforward.
Well, if we were trying to educate the public, it'd be one thing, but we're only trying to educate 11
Right, right.
people, so
Yeah.
we can do that on a retail basis, I think.
Right.
Excuse me, just going on. I studied the Lean Associates at the Nexus in Boston, and an excellent opportunity to study the casinos is the Aria Resort in Las Vegas, 68 acres, where everything is renewed. The energy comes from the air conditioning, comes from the base of the slot machines, instead of up in the ceiling, where it would waste a lot of energy. It's a really good.
What's the name of the?
What?
City Center, Aria Casino.
City
It's a new casino.
City Center, yeah.
MGM.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, great,
Very good project.
thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
one final point in regard to the role of these folks. As you recall, we are going to be working with Energy and Environmental Affairs as part of the evaluation teams.
Right.
Once we get, so then they would likely be called
Great.
upon to provide technical assistance to review our applications.
Good, that's a good.
Great.
That's a good point.
You guys to remember too, yeah. Great,
This is really helpful.
yeah, thank you, very interesting
Great.
stuff.
Sure, thank
Yeah,
you very
it
much
is.
for the
Thank you
opportunity.
very much.
Yes, very
Thank
much.
you.
Commissioner.
Excellent presentation, thank you.
Hey, Gail. Hey, Gail, you make sure we get a copy of your
Sure.
presentation.
Right.
Okay, item number 5.
Oh, of course we.
How come he gets a cookie and I only get one?
I requested a cookie.
You always say who wants a coffee order.
Steven.
That's a Weight Watchers cookie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Coffee.
Yeah, it's watch your weight go up cookie.
Reverse Weight Watchers.
Okay, item number 5, regulation update, is that Commissioner McHugh?
Well, it's really Todd Grossman. So Todd, why don't you come up and present? Todd has been working on this chart. It's been discussed with the gaming consultants and with the legal consultant, Anderson and Krieger, and the gaming consultants. And it's he adverted to it last week and we wanted to distribute the index so that everybody could see it and take a look at it. And then it's designed so that we can try to meet that schedule that we've set out of mid-March for the promulgation of the regs. So Todd, why don't you go through it and help folks understand what's here?
Sure. As referenced, this is the outline that I discussed at the last meeting that was prepared by the consultants in conjunction with myself and Anderson and Krieger. We have identified paragraph E, which is the Phase 2 process, as the priority at the time. Completing those regulations would allow the commission to move forward with the licensing process, as was discussed earlier, and then bringing in the rest of the regulations shortly thereafter. So the key that was identified to ensuring that the Phase 2 process regs were brought in on time was an allocation of our resources, an assignment of specific sections to particular individuals to take the lead in drafting. And as you can see, we've color-coded the assignment process. So one of the things we can do now, or certainly in the near future, is ask whether there are any particular sections that any commissioners would have an interest in taking a lead or being a part of the drafting process for, and I can assure that you're able to do that. Otherwise, the plan calls for the particular section to be drafted, reviewed by our in-house legal counsel, and then circulated to the commission for review by early March. That's the game plan.
And I think the plan is, we've already started with at least some of the regulations, is to, as some of these are drafted, to circulate them as they're drafted, because there are a bunch that are standalones, so that not all of it comes at one point and one slug at the end. We've now finished the policy determinations that underlie a bunch of those, and then certainly with respect to the number 16 and perhaps others, before we actually start to draft regulations, the factors will be distributed and discussed so that we can refine that further. So it's going to be an iterative process, but the overall goal is to reach that deadline with a fully informed commission and an adequate opportunity to discuss the content.
That's exactly right. Just to follow up with that, I think one of the first objectives that I will have is to take a look at the policy matrix and try to identify where those policy decisions that have already been made or discussed fit into the overall grid. So everyone has a good sense as to where everything fits in. And then just try to start to build it out for your review. So that's where we are right now with this. We can certainly go through any of the sections. Anyone has any questions or concerns? I think this is certainly intended to be a living document. It's not set in stone, but it gives us a good foundation to build on here. And to the extent we find that other sections are necessary, of course, we will include those. And to the extent we can combine any of these, we'll do that as well. But this just gives us a roadmap as to where we'd like to take the regulations. And I think if upon completion would give us the robust gaming regulations that have been discussed for some time.
So everything from F on is sort of like what we've been referring to as phase 2 of phase 2, right?
That's right, that's right. I think
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Phase 2B.
what we have,
Right, okay. So in other words, when we get E done, we would turn to everything else. E is what's going on now, is because this is all critical path for the slots license, basically.
that's right.
Really
And the
part of-
license process.
For the
Yeah,
license
licensing
process, because-
right.
To be able to meet the guide, the
Right.
post you mentioned
Right.
before, we have to do that.
And nothing else on this list is critical path in that sense.
That's right, and the understanding is that we'll be following up immediately after these phase 2 of phase 2 with everything else. So
Yeah.
it's not as though it's going to be put off for a long period of time.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah, I understand that.
And it looks like a big load because there's a lot there, but if you look at what's there, apart from some of the things that are unique, will be unique to us, like equal employment opportunity and some of those other things, a big chunk of what follows is, there are a lot of models
Boilerplate,
available.
yeah.
Right.
Right.
I have a couple of questions. Number 22, appointment of conservators. What might that refer to? And number 25, disposition of securities also. What might that?
There are, I believe there are statutory provisions dealing with the securities issue, and I'd have to brush up on what exactly
Okay.
that
I'll do that
pertains
myself
to.
as well.
The conservators is a good question. I can't recall exactly why that was included.
Why does mitigation plans with entertainment venues have its own category as opposed to a host of other similar issues, either a mitigation issue like local tourism or problem gambling?
Well, there's a
Because
specific
there's a specific
section.
statutory section, and it has to be part of the host, the application has to contain host community agreement, surrounding community agreement, and mitigation agreements with impacted entertainment venues. So those fall into a separate category of.
So the entertainment venues is pulled out. It's, they also have to have, for example, they have to have plans for dealing with problem gambling and so forth, but this is at a different level of specification.
Based on the application requirement.
Yeah. Okay.
But the other things go into 16.
Right.
Right? I mean, there's a host of
Right.
other criteria that we'll put in 16. But and the live entertainment value, I mean, the live entertainment venues has a piece in there for problem solving in the event that the developer and the venue can't agree. It's like the surrounding community thing. So
Right.
we have a role in
Right,
making
okay,
that.
okay. Great.
Well, if we're thinking about involving some of us in some of these, I would like to express my interest in number 5 and number 8, specifically relative to my minimum capital investment.
Sure.
I would like to express my interest in none.
Oh.
My interest in many, but my participation
Right.
in none.
We'll work you in, I'm sure. So.
Yeah.
We can easily satisfy that request.
At no great loss.
And, no, I didn't say that.
Todd, I also would be interested in number 8 as well as, depending on where other interests
Great.
come in.
Okay.
Host community agreements, surrounding community agreements, and live entertainment venue agreement.
We don't have it up. So are you going to turn this into, I mean, this is planned to be done by March 14th at this stage of the game, right? Are you going to turn this into more specificity? Is there a draft time when you want to see drafts? Is there a time when it's going to come before the commission for review, before the LGAC step and so forth? What else is going to get put into, what else is going to get charted here?
Well, I do
Okay.
have a schedule, and there are some dates on the plan that you just discussed that need to be tweaked slightly, just to coincide a little more accurately with the Secretary of State's publication schedule, but that's the ballpark. So the plan was, for me, by the first week of March, at the latest, to have draft language on 1 through 27, and to be able to submit that. Now, the understanding
To
being.
us.
To you.
Right.
I will have reviewed it. It'll then be turned over to you for review, for then final initial approval to start moving through the promulgation process, to notify the Local Government Advisory Council, to notify the Secretary of State's office, to publish notification in the newspaper. So I will have done a review, you will have done your preliminary review, and then we'll move it towards the public hearing process. At which point, of course, you can continue looking at it, but we'll lock it in at that point. As we move towards that, of course, the hope is that I will be receiving draft language, and that'll be circulated to you on an ongoing basis, so you can review it. What I will be doing, at least what I'll be planning on doing, is maintaining a master copy of this outline. I'm going to have to renumber it, again, to coincide with our existing numbering system in 205 CMR. But this will essentially be the subject heading that we'll work with, subject to some tweaking here and there. So by the time you're looking at it in mid-March, you will essentially have a listing of the 205 CMR sections with all of the language in front of you. And to the extent we need to tweak any other language in the existing CMR language, we can do that as well.
Right, okay.
But that's the plan.
Okay, well, two process things. I think it would be good, but the Commissioner McHugh and others are working on fine-tuning the project management chart, and including the process, the Secretary of State process and everything else. We discussed today, we might set this, in a couple of weeks, we may reset the target date for slots and move various dates back. But getting this step in here, at least the March 1 deadline, I think makes sense, so it's physically on there so we can see it in conjunction with all the rest of the amendments that are being made.
And secondly, and this is obvious, but, it's figuring out how we can get this in a way that isn't just all of a sudden we had 27 chapters. So trying to rotate it through or something.
Well, I'd certainly hope to be able to do it incrementally, like we've already done with the surrounding community regs
Right.
that the ombudsman drafted. You looked at those kind of individually, and we actually have another set of draft language that's in the pipeline dealing with surrounding communities and resolving conflicts between applicants and the municipalities that I would hope to have to you shortly to look at. So that's kind of the process that I think we envision when we put this together. It's just going to be a matter of now digging in and getting it done. But yeah, no, absolutely, the plan would not be to drop 27 sections on you on March 5th and say, here, I need these approved by next week.
Right. Okay.
You're not planning a vacation between now and May 15, hopefully?
Nothing.
Joke.
Nothing planned.
Nothing you can't
No
change.
voluntary vacation.
Great. I mean, it's.
Great work.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Color coded.
Yeah.
Color code, yes.
Great.
So-
Commissioner McHugh has his own color.
Yes, yeah, I didn't get to choose it, though.
Okay.
There is in the statute a provision for, and I'd forgotten this, and there is a provision in the statute for appointment of conservators for revoked, operation that has a revoked or failed license. So the commission can appoint somebody to be a temporary operator.
temporary,
And
yes.
It's good to have that done here, because if along the way somebody fails, early on, we'd want to have that regulation in place for
Right.
doing that.
I knew we
Yeah.
did that for a reason.
Right. I mean, we,
Todd, this is Jim's, this is your work product, right?
it is, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That,
And
I
that's
just sent
gotta
that
be
along
updated.
so you kind of see, I think the two documents go hand in hand.
Well, they do, that's
Yeah.
right, and I was just
Right.
wondering, we now, there are, since this version, or at least, since this version was done, there've been a bunch of decisions made
Right.
and additions made. But there also was, we're gonna figure out how to follow up on those kind of open-ended, but I guess they're phase two, so we're not in any big rush. Okay, that's right, all right.
But they ought to go, they will go into that matrix
Yeah.
before, so we have a complete record
I
of
think
what we've
that-
decided,
that's
what's
important, yeah.
open, and we can flag the things that need further discussion.
Right.
As we do that, then we'll have in one place, a complete record of what we've decided.
Yeah, that's really important. Okay, anything else, anybody, on this?
This is great.
Yeah,
Good.
there is.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, maybe a break.
Yeah, we'll have a quick 5-minute break. Adjourn.
Quick thought.
Okay, we will reconvene public meeting number 49. And I missed a topic, an important one, under public education information. We wanted to talk about, I don't know that we have really set a standard for requests for commissioners to meet with, particularly with applicants, or maybe also surrounding and host communities. I guess we really ought to be clear on both. So, as far as, this hasn't happened, but it might, and we need to figure out what we'll do. If an applicant wants to meet with a commissioner or two, well, they can't be more than two, do we do that? What are the issues there?
We do that with IEB now.
Well, you're doing it as IEB.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, right. Now, it's a good point, but as soon as Karen starts, you won't be,
Correct.
you'll be involved, but phasing out probably pretty quickly. So I don't know if it's a big deal, I just don't know what.
I think it is, I'm not sure it's a big deal or not, but I think we have to be pretty careful about that, because we are now going to get into a competitive process. We need to help the applicants move forward. We are assembling a staff designed to do that. It gets back to the discussions that we've had before about the decision makers meeting with applicants and inadvertently saying something that is perceived at least to be a little different from what's said to somebody else, and
Or beneficial or something, yeah.
or
right.
beneficial.
Or prejudicial.
Or prejudicial. And so it seems to me that at the very least, the subject matter of the request for the meeting, what do you want to meet us about, ought to be in writing, and we ought to take a look at it before we agree to do that. But I would think that in the main, most of the questions could and should be handled by our
By
able
staff.
staff that we're assembling. So it seems to me that
I can't
might
really
be thought about as the default.
Yeah, I can't really think of a question, of a topic that would come up that somebody might want to know where somebody else couldn't tell them, where staff couldn't tell them. So that seems right. So I guess we're saying we're not gonna preclude it, but it's probably not gonna happen, and if it does happen, we'd look at it, if a request comes in, we'd look at it very closely.
Right.
With and think about it.
Right.
Before we said yes. What about, now that we're in this more formal phase, surrounding and host communities? This is complicated because there are representatives of them everywhere we go, and I do speaking engagements all the time with people in the room. But what about if surrounding and host communities want to meet with commissioners? Same thing?
I would think the same thing. I can't right now think of a scenario in which our staff cannot field those questions.
Right.
But I think the same thing, though, we would say, put a request in writing, and we'll evaluate.
I mean, if people come to if representatives of a surrounding or host community come to a Chamber of Commerce meeting or something, or come to a regional and RPA meeting or something where we've been asked to be a speaker, that's fine.
Sure.
But formal meetings, like the call that I got from the state rep to say, would like to have a commissioner, forget which state, just any old state rep, say, to get a rep wants to convene his or her surrounding communities, and have a commissioner come. Would we discourage that?
But I think we need to think that through, but if it's a group of communities and say the meeting is both publicized on our website and open to anybody who wants to come, that may be one thing. But particularly if there is a potential for a competitive environment, I think we ought to be very leery of going and speaking other than at Chamber of Commerce meetings or other things that are open to everybody and where the questions are taken in public and everybody can hear the answers. I think we ought to be very leery of doing those kinds of things for this relatively short period of time that the competitive process is forming. Once the competitive process is over, then we're in a
It's a
very
whole different story, yeah,
right.
right. I think that seems right. I mean, so the sort of distinguishing feature is if it's kind of an official meeting, with the governing body of the surrounding community or host community wants to meet with the commissioner, as opposed to representatives of the community coming to a public meeting, okay?
Right.
I think that's an understandable distinction. And none of this is absolutely locked in stone. We would look at specific requests if they came in, but in general, that makes sense to me.
And depending on whether we're gonna, the likelihood of we're gonna get requests, it is worth thinking about perhaps at the next level and drafting up a policy so that everybody understands what that policy is and what we can do and what we can't do. And the very process of crafting the policy, I'm sure, would help us think through with some precision whether these defaults really should be the defaults, whether there's exceptions or something.
Right. I've thought about, we can also, can we separate, we represent and work for, we have partners in the operating tracks now. And I was thinking, for example, just hypothetically, that when the season opens, it would be fun, interesting, to go to the opening day
and be a part of it, but they're also both competitors, but they're also both people we
Licensees.
work with, licensees whom we work with now. And it seems to me we ought to try to be able to make a distinction, so we can do our job fully as license regulators and partners of the racing industry, while, being careful not to cross some line.
And I have to say that officials at tracks, and I think we have officials from both tracks here today, have been very careful to understand that we were attending in a racing capacity, meaning we were dealing with issues pertaining to racing and not in any way speak about gaming.
Right.
So that I must say has been very respectful of our dual roles.
Right, I agree with that. All right, so we can cross that specific bridge when we get to it, but I think in general, so is there a reg writing opportunity coming up when we would do that, or that would be in the?
Well, I don't think we have to do a reg, I think we could do a policy.
Oh, just a policy,
Yeah,
okay.
and I think we ought to do it, since the question's been raised, and I think
Yeah,
we
okay.
ought to try and do it promptly and circulate it and agree on it. And
Okay.
We could do that in the next week or so.
Yeah, I would be on the conservative side as well. I know of at least one jurisdiction that has imposed a very strict restriction on commissioners in Indiana, as a matter of course.
That they can't do what?
They don't meet with licensees.
Even with licensees?
Even with licensees, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna not be here, and I hate to toss it on you, but do you mind if I toss it
No,
on-
I
toss it on
think
you?
it's important to do.
Okay.
And so, as other things, so I'll be happy to take a crack
Okay.
at that.
Okay. All right, so then we are to the IEB report.
Mr. Chair, I've already given a portion of that report in speaking
Yeah.
about our anticipated timelines, but in addition to that, with regard to scope of licensing, we really are nearing the end of those determinations. We have two outstanding issues with two separate applicants that we are still finalizing. We needed to wait for a document, we got it, and we're in the process of analyzing, and we will have those completed shortly. As we reported last week, we had six of our reviews completed, and those applications were sent out to our investigators to begin those
So
investigations.
6 of the 11 are underway.
6 of the 11 and 3 more this week.
Great.
So now we're at 9 of the 11 with completed reviews, investigations beginning. So there are only 2 remaining, and those were two of our applications who came in toward the end of the process. And so we are that review is underway. We are waiting for some additional documentation. So we hope to have that completed and have all the investigations underway in the near future. I would hope as soon as 2 weeks from now, we'll be able to report that we have all of them underway.
Great.
That completes my report.
Yeah, I think that's it. And
And it is a reminder to please help us by getting your documentation in.
right. And for people now who are interested in time, that the green line, you remember up here, is the background check phase, and we can only go as fast as we get the information. So communities, developers, that's the critical variable at this point. Okay, Racing Division report.
Mr. Chairman, I'm subbing for Dr. Dorenberger today. This is just a quick update on 2 matters, then I'll turn it over to Mr. O'Donnell. First, a little bit of recap. Last time I was here, we talked about the fact that while Section 7B of the Gaming Act was enough to authorize some degree of regulation of simulcasting, in that act, that it does not authorize live racing and does not authorize simulcasting takeouts that are currently provided for in chapters 128A and 128C. So in order for the commission to continue to possess the same level of regulatory authority over both of these matters, there needs to be some reauthorizing of at least the core provisions of those two statutes on or before July 31st of 2014. So what the review team is currently working on is putting together a draft, single proposed chapter that will incorporate all those core provisions that currently enable that broad regulatory authority in 128A and 128C. And of course, in tandem, we are working on draft report. We are substantially through the work that we have to do for 128A with respect to extracting those core provisions, putting them together. And we'll shortly start work on 128C, which is a little more complicated because, as you might recall, we have there to deal with both racing and non-racing simulcast licensees. If everything goes according to plan, and they very infrequently do, we hope that we can get to the commission a first draft, or at least the draft, of this new merged chapter and draft report by the end of next week. I'll be away the week after that. And hopefully then there'll be enough time for the commission to digest all this material. We've got substantial material. And we can pick it up and get it filed, third week maybe of February.
So these redrafts would be designed to replace the existing 128A and C when they sunsetted on July 1, 2014?
Yes.
That would be the objective.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so you're going to self-consciously draft racing regs, racing law, a new racing law essentially.
Yeah.
With the understanding that there's now a common understanding, which there was not last week, that there does need to be a new, sometimes referred to as omnibus piece of legislation which authorizes live raising as well as other things. And there's now clear consensus on that. The legislature understands that. So what we've said is give us your best to the staff is give us your best judgment about how that ought to be done. Right. And it's the legislature's job ultimately, but I think they would like us to tell them, and nobody likes that end of the session, last minute unsunsetting thing. So this would be a long-term, lasting piece of legislation that could carry live racing on. Okay, so that's great.
And I might just add that that is what will not involve any kind of amendment to Chapter 23K of the Gaming Act.
Right.
And the only other thing is that over the last couple of days, we've received approximately 212 emails regarding simulcasting of greyhound races. And I think it's fairly clear that they're part of an effort by an organization known as Great 2K USA. And what these, at least the vast majority of these emails demand of the commission is that in its report to the legislature, it recommend that in addition to having banned dog racing within the Commonwealth, that the legislature also ban simulcast wagering on dog races that take place beyond the borders of the Commonwealth. These emails are in the wake of an exchange of emails between the president of Great 2K, Christine Dorchak, and myself as to the meaning of the current law that bans greyhound racing, and we have a difference of opinion as to what that law means. And I think that this is...
Because her view is that it also banned simulcast of greyhound racing.
Correct.
And your view is that it does not, and our collective view is that it does not.
Yes.
Okay. Do I remember that is it with the 2014 date, that simulcasting of greyhound racing would lapse?
Yes,
So
that is true, Mr. Chairman.
So
yeah.
that if we do nothing on simulcasting of greyhound racing, it will not be legal in Massachusetts after the 2014?
No, not quite.
Okay.
Currently, Section 92 of the session law in which the Gaming Act appears provides a statutory race meeting license to the former two Greyhound racetracks. And that provision sunsets at the end of July.
2014?
Yes.
Okay.
But-
So if we do nothing, you can't simulcast greyhound racing in Massachusetts
The other
after?
two tracks.
No, the other two tracks could, in my view.
Oh, I see. So only at the Wonderland and Raynham, the tracks which are no longer live, well, or what, no, aren't, okay.
Well, but wait a minute, the other two tracks could by virtue of 128C.
Yes.
Which also expires.
Right.
Yes.
But that also sunsets
Yes.
in July. So if we just did nothing,
Relative to simulcast of,
just did, yeah.
did nothing, okay.
Did nothing,
Right.
then there'd be no simulcasting.
That is true.
And if we did something that didn't include dogs, there'd be no simulcasting of greyhound racing after July 1, 2014.
If we did nothing, yes and no. And the yes part.
You must be a lawyer.
I have to confess to that, Mr. Chairman, yes. The problem for the dog tracks was that once there was a ban on greyhound racing, they couldn't simulcast because they had no live racing.
Right.
So it is true that if we did nothing,
Right.
the lapse of the license, live racing license, would produce an expiration of the simulcasting right under 128C, because that right depends on the existence of live racing in 128A. But as far as, so that's the yes part of the answer. The no part of the answer is that Section 7B of the Gaming Act authorizes, without any express limitations, the commission to issue simulcasting licenses to two categories: entities that are formally licensed under 128A and C, and gaming licensees.
But if we did nothing.
That would continue to exist.
But if we did not issue a simulcasting license for dogs under 7B, and we did not issue and did not permit under the reinvented 128C racing, simulcasting of dog races, then there'd be no power to do it. In other words, we would not have to affirmatively ban it. We would have the power not to affirmatively authorize it.
I'm not sure, Commissioner, whether your hypothetical includes the absence of live racing.
Yes.
If it does include that, then I agree with you.
So say that again?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, it doesn't, my hypothetical doesn't, and I confused myself. No, it doesn't. I mean, we have a difference. My thought is that if everything sunsets on July 1, 2014, and we have the power to craft statutes and regulations that we're going to recommend to the legislature thereafter, notwithstanding 7B, which is permissive, we have a choice as to whether we whether we exclude simulcasting of dog racing from other jurisdictions, from whatever legislative authority and regulatory authority we create thereafter. We have the choice to do that.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And if we do not affirmatively include it, that kind of racing, and legislation is passed without permission to have simulcasting of out-of-state dog racing, then there is no simulcasting of out-of-state dog racing.
Well, that's the bit that there's an argument on the other side which says that because 128C simulcasting right is automatic if you have live racing, then once you have live racing, you don't need specific statutory authority to simulcast.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's the existing statute. And if we were to
We could
draft
write
a
it.
statute that says a live racing licensee may simulcast live horse racing from other jurisdictions, then that's a limitation.
We could exclude it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there any, what I'm getting at, and I think probably Commissioner McHugh is too, is it whose decision is it whether we should be simulcasting dog racing or not? That doesn't feel to me like a regulator's decision. That sounds to me like a legislative decision. And if I'm following this right, we have been directed to propose a reauthorization of live horse racing. So we've been asked to do that. Is there, as to whether or not we include simulcasting of dogs as well as simulcasting of horses, is there any, are they the same with respect to the legislative, what's what I'm trying to say? Is there any difference between our ability to permit simulcasting of horse racing and our ability to permit simulcasting of dog racing? Is it up, we could leave either one of them in or out, depending on how we feel like it?
Well, I don't think we'd consider leaving horse racing out.
Well, I understand that, but is that because we like horse racing and we don't like dog racing, or is that because there's a mandate somewhere? I understand that, but there needs to be some reason.
Certainly, we could propose a statute that left anything out, right? We could, if we're going to recommend this to the legislature a statute, we could make a recommendation that simulcasting of X but not Y be included in the statute. Now, the legislature may agree or disagree. It seems to me that under 7B, and that we have enormously broad regulatory authority to permit various kinds of simulcasting or not. Now, I know David doesn't think that it goes that far, but it seems to me that we do. But it would be much better, as in other cases, whatever we do, to have some legislative basis that indicates the legislative intent before we go enacting regulations that stretch our regulatory authority, even if our regulatory authority is extremely broad. It's always better to have
I agree.
something that tracks the legislative
Well, do you think that we should debate whether or not we want to include dog simulcasting and make a decision one way or the other? Is that part of our purview?
I would like to think about that before coming up with an answer.
Okay. Yeah, well, I wasn't looking for it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think that's the question, that,
Right.
that is a whole can of worms and policy issues. I have no idea whether I'm in favor of simulcasting dogs or not. I've never thought about it in my life.
Right.
So, but if we're going to either not do it, if we have to do one or the other, then it's a big decision that we need to make. And how we would get to that decision hasn't really been factored into this time frame of rewriting these regs.
That's correct.
Writing this legislation.
That's correct.
So I think somehow or other we have to decide on that. So that maybe, next week while I'm not here, you guys can decide which way you're gonna go on.
Right. I think not. We certainly could have the statute drafted in a way that preserved the status quo, because it's easy to excise something, easier to excise something rather than into a draft, or from a draft, than it is to insert things, new things in it. So it seems to me that, and that, I assume, is the track that you're on.
Yes.
And we'll have the draft there, and then we can decide whether we want to take that up as a policy issue among the many other policy
Right.
issues.
I suppose we could put it in both ways and say we consider this a legislative decision. It's been drafted two ways
Right.
and. it's up
Would
to
it
the
be helpful, Mr. Chair, to have some quick research done? For example, there have been several states who have banned dog racing. Have they in fact banned simulcasting of the same? Would that be helpful to all of us to find what others have done?
From my standpoint, I don't really think I don't think it's appropriate for us to make that decision. That feels to me like a legislative decision. So I would think the legislature ought to do that research.
But we have to make a recommendation to them.
Well, we don't.
We don't.
We don't have to.
That's
So
an
leave it the
interesting-
way it is and
I'm
leave out
talking,
any
I'm thinking out
recommendation?
loud here, but, no, not leave it the way it is. I think, at the moment, my instinct would be to draft it both ways.
Right.
Draft it in, draft it out. And in our cover letter, we would say, and there may be other issues like this that we feel are important issues to be addressed. We didn't feel it was appropriate for us to make a substantive decision like that.
Right.
That
That
makes
might
sense.
be the most Solomonic way to deal with this.
It's called kicking the can to the other guys.
Right.
That's
Okay.
certainly easily done.
Okay, well, let's presumptively, I think that's the way we're going, so let's do that, and we'll keep thinking about it.
Draft either way.
Draft both, yeah, okay.
So then I'll turn it over to Mr.
Okay.
O'Donnell.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, what you have in front of you is a list of tickets that we're looking for.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. There's next week, you and Jennifer are gonna bring to us for a vote, the proposed medical regs changes, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think that's right. So,
Right.
I just wanna make sure everybody's on notice that they're out there, they're being commented on, and we will probably be voting on those next week.
What we're gonna be voting on next week is approval of a draft that we then are gonna put into the
pipeline.
formal pipeline,
Right.
which includes a period of public comment.
Right,
So
Okay.
it's the beginning of a process.
got it, thank you. Okay, sorry, Doug.
That's okay. What you have in front of you is a list of tickets from the 2011 unclaimed tickets of individuals that are looking to get paid on. How this works in 128A is that wages that are made in a specific year, this being 2011, they have the following year to come forth and try to claim these tickets. So they have until December 31st of that year. And what you see is a list of tickets that individuals have come forward to, and it has been reviewed by our state auditors, and they are in agreement that these tickets should be paid to the individuals.
But we don't know who the individuals are, right?
Yeah, we do, they have come forward. These are the ticket numbers. We don't have their names on here because of public record. We didn't want to put their names on this docket, but we do have their names.
Okay. All right, so I thought this was gonna be these were unclaimed tickets, but these are old claims that people have come in for, okay.
Right, and once we get the approval for that, then 128A, 5A, the tracks have 90 days to pay the unclaimed ticket amount to the Commonwealth.
And then, just so I understand the lingo, it will then no longer be an outs, right? It's now it's an outs, but it'll no longer be an outs because it's been claimed.
Right, it's, exactly. The outs are no longer outs.
Got it.
So once that happens, if and when we get an approval on this, then the unclaimed ticket monies will be sent to the Commonwealth. They have 90 days through April 1st to make the payments, all 4 tracks. Once that happens, and the funds are in place, and it's approved by the commission, the Commonwealth then in turn deposits the monies to Suffolk Downs and Plainridge into their purse accounts. And with Wonderland and Rainham, those monies go into the stabilization fund. So once we get an approval,
Racehorse stabilization fund.
dogs.
Dog stable.
Greyhound.
Yes.
Greyhound.
Greyhound stabilization fund, right.
So we have already, our auditors have already reviewed the outs books from the tracks. And if and when we get an approval on this, we can move forward with the next section.
Okay. Is there any controversy? I gather there's,
No,
No,
this is a
it's pretty
routine matter, Mr.
standard.
Chair.
Okay.
This happens every year.
Yeah.
It's just, these are people who basically walked away from the track with a winning ticket in their pocket and forgot the cash.
They lost it,
right?
misplaced it, whatever
Right.
the case may
Didn't
be.
realize it was a winner.
Right. I don't know,
do you want to move?
little found
Yeah, I
money there.
move that
yeah.
we approve as this document states, we approve the payment of the 2011 outs book to the individuals that are unnamed in the amounts enclosed.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
Great, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it, right? Anything else coming?
I think
I think that's everything. Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good work.
We are adjourned.